Good night, I have to say, and welcome to H866. 866. I will continue with the mirror and the gestalt it gives, and I will look at it from yet another angle. This is how to go about it. Look at it from as many angles as you can, because this is an X, is pre-ontological. It doesn't lend itself to definitions. So the way to go about this is just the working method of Rodolphe Gasquet. Many different. It's actually an infinitude of approaches. And this is extremely helpful, so I'm going back to my old pal Arkady Plotnitsky. And all of a sudden I understand what he wrote. I was completely and covered in his book Complementarity, where he compared Bohr with Derrida and looked into the matters of quantum physics, and to see what sort of parallels could one do, and how could one help the understanding of both quantum mechanics and deconstruction, i.e. Derrida. And one of his papers that serves as a way into his books, there are several and they're very difficult, of course, as usual, is called The Paradoxical Interplay of Exactitude and Indefinitiveness. And I call this lecture for exactedness. And when I say exactedness, it is looking into that thing that we call localization. And localization seems to be so completely natural for each and everyone in our modern world and culture, and if we don't have it, we think we lost something completely valuable. That is, however, not the case. This is connected to the Gestalt dogma, the dogma that is pre-ontological before any concepts, and it gives rise to something we call localization. Localization is the idea that something is somewhere in an exact spot without any observer watching it. And this is related, not the exact same thing, but it's related. So think about the mirror function. Exist, non-existent, present, absent. So these things exist, present at one place. Those are in the same ballpark, and they are connected to what we perceive emotionally, one can say, to be localization, where something is independent of me as an observer. So the mirror image gives rise to this idea that something is in a definite point. So the two first lectures, well, at least the last lecture, we were talking about time to be somewhere exact in time, 10:05 or something like that. This is a now something is in this very time. And then we also have this to be in an exact position. This is related to time and shape. So the first take, I look into the mirror, I get an idea of a perfect shape, perfect idea you could call it. This is the original. The second thing, you get an idea of a perfect time, the original time. The thing that was before, first, that moved into the mirror and caused the reflection, so to speak. The third thing is a combination of the two and yet more. That is being in an exact position. So you see the connection. To be in exact position is also related to be an exact spot of time. Once I'm here, next time I'm here, next time I'm here out of the frame. Also think of Zenon's paradox, where Zenon himself gets stuck in this idea. Well, it's not even an idea. He gets stuck in experience. And once more, it's our perceived refusal to accept both sides, both the thing looking into the mirror and what's coming back, both where something is and where it's not. This can be illustrated in this way. Here we have the mirror, someone is looking into the mirror, and as I said, it's getting reflected, and the mirror image is here. This gives you the idea, when I look into the mirror, that something is situated. The thing looking into the mirror is situated in an exact spot. Yet, once more, we look into the mirror. The mirror reflection we get is situated somewhere between the mobile I'm holding in and the tane of the mirror. It doesn't seem to have an exact position. So you can say once more, it has been tainted. It's not clear. It's deranged. This gives you the idea that this position, the thing I'm holding in, the thing looking into the mirror, does actually have a real position. A real position, whereas the mirror image doesn't have it. A mirror image can never have it because we perceive the mirror image to not be exactly in the mirror, but more somewhere outside the mirror. This is something that gives rise to exactness, that something is exactly in one position. And as it goes with the other things, this is also a striving to see something defined, definite, without movement. It is actually here, and is here and nowhere else. And this ends up with the Newtonian coordinate system, or the Cartesian coordinate system. And I would say the current idea, which is very, very important, that things are in a specific position. This experience, I would say, is extremely strong. It's very, very hard to move around or loosen up. You won't let that thing go. And I think it has effects that you sort of take away yourself, because when I move here, this is a real example, I move around here, everything is bound to change position according to me. And if it's not according to me, what is it according to? So you see, there is a big problem here in localization. And I used those problems before many times, already in Götabergsgatan I started with those things. But this is much stronger because it goes into perception itself. I see how this idea of exactness started, localization. And therefore it's so much easier to see that it could be different. It doesn't have to be that way. And this is the time of deconstruction of localization. Let me read here from page 199 from Exactitude and Indefiniteness by Arkady Plotnitsky. He writes about the development the last couple of centuries of this exactitude. Throughout this history, however, an alternative classical understanding of reality and probability and their relationship, firmly established by 19th century, as represented in particular by Pierre-Simon Laplace's vision of the world, has continued to persist and remain dominant. Classical works, both as a conceptual and a historical designation, the first vis-à-vis non-classical and second vis-à-vis romantic. The dominance of this view in our own time is exemplified by Albert Einstein's famous discontent with quantum mechanics, in particular in his lifelong debate with Bohr on quantum foundations. A discontent mostly widely known by this repeated pronouncements to the effect that God does not play dice. This content, however, had more to do with reality or ontology than it did with randomness and causality. As such, although Einstein ultimately preferred to have causality as well, whether nature or our interactions with it would allow for a classical view is another matter. Einstein thought it should, while Bohr argued that it might not. And this is important. He didn't say it should not, he said might not. And this is exactly what the mirror shows. It doesn't show it has to be another way. It just shows it can be another way. The proclaimment of the Gestalt dogma is it's only one. And once you know or understand body, soul and mind that it could be otherwise, that's enough. That's just about enough. Because it's the sheer singularity of this Gestalt dogma which is its force. This is the thing that grabs your heart. This is the thing that grabbed Einstein's mind. Not so much about science. The debate between Bohr and Einstein was never about science. They agreed on science. What they couldn't agree on was this emotional and subjective stuckedness. The stuckedness that reality could be only one thing. So, to be more specific, Bohr could even say, it could be your way, you say Einstein, but it could also be some other way. Whereas Einstein's view always had to be, it can only be my way. And those things are extremely different. They are not contrary to each other. You could say that Einstein say all in all cases, whereas Bohr say in some cases. So the claims bear different weight. Bohr's argument is much lighter. It doesn't weigh as heavy, whereas Einstein's is really heavy. He says in all possible cases. And what he actually means is down to actual experience. What Einstein said was that it wasn't not so much he couldn't logically understand it or conceptually understand it or explanatory understand it. He could not perceive it. And that's very different. To say that you can't perceive a thing to be a certain way is extremely strong. And nothing will convince you, nothing in this world at all. And I began to doubt now that Einstein changed his mind towards his death. I don't think so. If he said something to that effect, I think it was just to preserve his good aftermath, his good rumor, his good reputation. I don't honestly believe you can change at that old age. It's impossible. It came from reality itself. Arkady, who's a master at writing, continues in the next paragraph. I'll skip a couple lines here. This is not surprising because the philosophical stakes are immense and they extend well beyond physics. Well, yes, they do. They extend to everyday life at most. Every doing we do, every written paper in this world, no exception, bar none. Everything is foundly on the same bones, the same fund, the same ground. And they come from what he calls two ontological hypotheses. And this is the way Arkady expresses the whole thing. And to be honest, it's actually sent me into the wrong path. He says there is one classical view and one non-classical view. And I understand why he wrote this, but he didn't set my mind clear. This way of explaining the whole thing makes the idea that there are two opposing views and they weigh in the same time. They have the same weight. They don't. The argument from Bohr is much lighter. A little bit later he goes further to an event. Suppose something, anything has happened, let us call it an event. How did it come about? Question mark. Something must have caused it, or so it would appear. And so it is also generally assumed, especially if the event belongs to an ordered configuration or arises according to some law. Kant calls this assumption the principle of causality. He defines that which causes an event as the cause of this event. From causes to effects, while the principle of causality proceeds by inference from effects to causes. The principle of causality implies that reality has a causal character if one can establish it, conceive of it, define it, describe it. Let me continue on page 200 and so forth. This is a major difficulty, known as the problem of causality, which Hume understood especially astutely. It is, Hume contended, beyond our reach ever to a certain actual causal connection between events, even if such connection exists. We can at most surmise probable connection between events, although in certain cases such connections are sufficiently determinable and even nearly certain. Nevertheless, one might still reason as follows. While such ultimate causal connection between events and the architecture of the underlying reality responsible for these connections, we have a reality out there and it's connected between causal references. Cause and effect connects everything in the outside world. This is the glue that puts the outside world together. This is the thing that causes this one to move here. There's a cause and effect. And that's extremely interesting. Nevertheless, one might still reason as follow. Is it thinkable, conceivable for us, even with certainty, to whether such conceptions are correct? Oh, my dear God. Oh. This is the most general form of the view of the world, or ontological hypothesis, that I call classical. So to have a whole world, we need to construct cause and effect as well. And cause and effect, I would say, when I understand the mirror better, it's sort of to take away the observer, because the observer is the one, even according to Hume, who puts events that comes to his experience, or rather is in his experience, in a certain connection. And he realizes it's the observer himself that does that. And that is rather hard to question. And that is one of the reasons so many people really try to conceive a cause and effect out there, because that is automatic. And this is, I actually need this one now. Let's see here. Let's sort of fix it. You have thing number 1 here, and here you have thing number 2. This has a causal effect on number 1, and you can turn this upside down. What do I mean by that? Well, you can see it both ways. This is very important. The first way of seeing it is that they both have definite positions. But things move. Things in the world move. How can we still have definite positions and have movable things? Well, into the seeing steps cause and effect. 2 causes A to move a bit. And this is moving a bit as well. The movement can potentially be counted, can be measured somehow, and you still have localization. So cause and effect is a necessary conjunct or additive to localization. Of course, you can't only have localization, you need to cause and effect as well. And they go hand in hand and they interlock. So the whole system of the universe is a combination of localization in one hand and cause and effect in the other hand. They together helps to sort of fix the whole world so nothing moves. Well, of course it moves in one sense, because you have one thing here, a billiard ball hitting the other billiard ball. But in some sense nothing moves, but you can control the action by counting how much force this one had, what direction it had, and what angle it had, and so forth, what mass. So everything is still fixed in a way. If you add those things, you know where they are. And this interlockedness is connected to the mirror as well. On one hand you have localizedness, on the other one, the mirror image, you have cause and effect. They together create the idea that everything in the universe can be a closed-off system, self-sufficient, self-regulating. And they need the 2 factors, brethren or twins. One is localization, the other one is cause and effect. And they interlock, so to speak. And they get, this is really, this is almost 10:30, and now I'm pressing the words here and using an expression I shouldn't, and you have to forgive me. But they are the excuse to getting rid of the observer. This is not how it worked, of course, but that's my tired way of expressing it right now. How did they get rid of the observer? Of course, it wasn't a bunch of people who said somewhere in time, let's get rid of the observer. No, it's not how it worked. But it's a very simple way of explaining it, oversimplification. But we all deserve one good oversimplification a day. It's good for the health. It makes you more vigorous. Do an oversimplification and say something, I don't know what, all trees looks the same. I don't care if it's a magnolia or if it's a flower. They all look the same to me. This is a crude oversimplification. The observer, of course, disappeared in the very same instant these two interlocked. And that happened in the very exact moment you look into the mirror. So it can go both ways. Well, according to me and Niels Bohr, it could go another way. There's another way the actual experience could end. Not talking about concept, constructs or proof. I talk about actual experience. Because quantum mechanics is the only science that is based on actual experience. Something you can see for yourself. You can go, like a couple of friends of mine have done, to a quantum laboratory and see it for yourself. It can be seen. And I think that's an important thing. Seeing is believing. And if more people saw this, it could help. But you might as well ignore it. The mirror is stronger in some way, because you can also put it in historically and understand how people went one way and how they get stuck with that. And every time you look into the mirror, the thing you see in the mirror won't, so to speak, make you change your mind. And I have actually a metaphor. I thought about that. It is an experience of a friend, experience of mine, of a friend of mine. She was an anorectic. And imagine she's looking into the mirror. Every time she looks into the mirror, she will see a fat person. And to encourage her, go to the mirror, Annika, go to the mirror, Annika, and look again. Do you understand? It doesn't help. Because her experience looking into the mirror will never change. Actually gets stronger even every time you look into the mirror. But it might be different. And she will never come to that conclusion by looking into the mirror. My mirror vision has sort of eased up somehow. And one of the things I stumble on, Arkady Plotnitsky is fantastic, but one of the things I stumble on was his putting the two views on the same level. They're not on the same level. One is very strong. The strong argument is Einstein. He says in all cases it is like this. In every known cases, now and forever, it will be like this. And what Bohr said, he just said it might be different. There is a possibility for difference. And that's enough. Because in the bottom, it's a singularity. And none of the cases Annika look into the mirror will she see. It's not like one Thursday, the 8th of March, she's going to see a skinny person and the next day the fat person appears again. No, it won't happen. You see how tricky the mirror is. It doesn't show a true picture. So go into the way and think. Either the person looking into the mirror is the true or the mirror reflection. That is in itself tricky. It can lure you into a wrong alley road. And you get into this circular thing. I call it circular. Because, you see, this is shut off. It doesn't take anything in. That's the same thing as being circular, self-proven. You don't need any input anymore, and you cut off all contact with the world. And this, of course, is the body. And since the body is gone, is left into darkness, you are dependent on the little information the body gives. And what does it give to you? Well, it gives this distorted vision of the world. And since that's the only thing you have, you cling on to it even more because it's not sufficient. And in the end, you have a sort of an anorectic worldview. So We're going from closing of the Western mind to an anorectic worldview. Somewhere these things are equatable. Well, it was tough enough for a nightly discourse. I say thank you very much, and now go to bed, all of you, directly.
Thank you.